There is a moment in every athlete's life when everything they worked for finally arrives. The contract, the uniform, the crowd, the dream made real. For Royce White, that moment came in June 2012, when the Houston Rockets selected him with the 16th pick in the NBA draft. The cameras flashed, he smiled. The world was watching a future star being born. What the world didn't know was that Royce White was already at war, not with opponents, not with coaches, but with his own mind. And that war was about to destroy everything. This is not a story about failure. This is a story about what happens when a system built for physical giants has no room for a man fighting invisible battles. Royce White grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. By every external measure, he was built for greatness. 6 feet 8 inches, 260 pounds. A rare combination of size, vision, and skill that made scouts describe him as a once-in-a-generation talent. He could handle the ball like a guard, rebound like a center, and read the game like someone who had been playing it for 40 years. But beneath that frame lived something else entirely. From childhood, Royce White suffered from generalized anxiety disorder, not the kind of anxiety that makes you nervous before a big game. The clinical kind, the kind that grips your chest at 3 a.m. for no reason, the kind that convinces your body that danger is everywhere, even when the room is completely silent. He also suffered from obsessive-compulsive disorder. And at the center of it all sat one specific paralyzing fear: aviophobia, the fear of flying. In a league where teams travel by plane over 100 times per season, that fear was not a minor inconvenience. It was a career-ending landmine buried directly in his path. Here's what nobody tells you about the 2012 NBA draft. Royce White told the Houston Rockets about his anxiety disorder before they selected him. He was transparent. He was honest. He believed that the organization would work with him, accommodate him, build a plan that allowed him to compete while managing his mental health. The Rockets said they understood. They said they were committed to his well-being. What followed was one of the most documented failures of institutional care in professional sports history. When training camp began, the problem started immediately. White requested that the team arrange ground transportation for road trips when possible. He asked for a mental health professional to be part of the organizational support structure. He wanted a formal plan, in writing, that outlined how his condition would be managed throughout the season. These were not radical demands. They were the basic accommodations any employer is legally and morally obligated to discuss with an employee managing a documented medical condition. The Rockets stalled. Meetings were scheduled and canceled. Promises were made and quietly abandoned. Royce White showed up, he practiced, he performed, and he waited for the organization to honor the commitments they had made to him. The first suspension came in October 2012. The Rockets suspended White for 1 game, citing conduct detrimental to the team. His response was immediate and public, he went on Twitter, in an era when athletes still feared speaking out, and said what most people in professional sports refused to say out loud. He called the NBA's mental health support a broken system. He said teams treated psychological conditions as character flaws rather than medical realities. He said the league cared about players' bodies and not their minds. The sports media called him difficult. Analysts called him a distraction. Former players called him ungrateful. Here was a man with a guaranteed contract, a lottery pick, a golden future, and he was complaining. That response told you everything about where society was in 2012 regarding mental health. And it told you everything about why Royce White's story matters, now more than ever. Over the next several months, White played only a handful of games for the Rockets' developmental affiliate. The tension between him and the organization became public, ugly, and unresolvable. He was suspended multiple times. He was eventually traded to the Philadelphia 76ers, then to the Sacramento Kings. Neither stop produced a fresh start. The pattern repeated itself. An organization would acquire him, claim to support him, and then fail to deliver on that support when the reality of managing his condition became operationally inconvenient. By 2013, Royce White's NBA career was functionally over. He was 22 years old. Let that sit for a moment. 22 years old. One of the most gifted basketball players of his generation. Gone not because he lacked talent, not because he lacked work ethic, not because a rival player outperformed him. Gone because the system he entered had no infrastructure, no language, and no genuine willingness to handle what he brought through the door. What happened after the NBA is a story of a man refusing to disappear quietly. Royce White played in the Canadian League, in minor leagues, in any arena that would have him. He kept himself in shape. He kept himself available. And he kept talking loudly, consistently, often controversially about mental health in professional sports. He became, against his will, an accidental activist. He testified. He gave interviews. He appeared on panels. He used the platform that his brief NBA career had given him to say the things that current players, still under contract, still dependent on team goodwill, could not say for themselves. In 2020, something shifted. The death of George Floyd happened blocks from where Royce White grew up in Minneapolis. He threw himself into political activism, running for public office in Nevada in 2022. He lost, but he remained visible, vocal, and impossible to ignore. The NBA, for its part, eventually caught up. In 2018, the league launched a mental health and wellness program requiring all 30 teams to have licensed mental health professionals on staff. In 2019, Kevin Love of the Cleveland Cavaliers publicly discussed his panic attack during a game. DeMar DeRozan opened up about his depression. A culture that had once mocked Royce White for speaking began, slowly, to speak the same language. Royce White never received a formal acknowledgement from the league. No apology, no recognition that what happened to him was institutional failure rather than personal weakness. The mental health infrastructure that exists in the NBA today exists in part because of what he went through, but his name is rarely attached to it. There is a version of the story that ends with a moral about resilience, about surviving the worst and finding peace. But this story deserves more honesty than that. Royce White lost something that cannot be returned. He lost years of competition at the highest level. He lost the chance to prove what he could have become. He lost the opportunity to compete on merit, which is all any athlete ever asks for. And he lost it not to injury, not to another player, not to the randomness of the game, but to the indifference of a billion-dollar institution that decided his mental illness was too complicated to manage. He was not wrong. He was early. And being early, in a world not yet ready for the conversation you are trying to start, costs everything. The next time you watch an NBA game and a player misses time for what the team calls personal reasons, remember Royce White. The next time a professional athlete speaks publicly about anxiety, about depression, about the invisible weight of performing at the highest level while quietly drowning, remember that this conversation had a price. Someone paid it before the rest of the world was willing to listen. His name was Royce White. He was the 16th pick in the 2012 NBA draft. He was 22 years old when the system ended his career. And he never once pretended that what happened to him was anything other than what it was. That took more courage than most people will ever be asked to show.